Good morning. On this Palm Sunday, I would like to share an abbreviated version of the Passion narrative according to the Gospel of St. Matthew. And following that, I will share a brief reflection. Jesus stood before the governor Pontius Pilate, who questioned him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus said, "You say so." And when he was accused by the chief priests and elders, he made no answer. Then Pilate said to him, "Do you not hear how many things they are testifying against you?" But he did not answer him one word, so that the governor was greatly amazed. Now on the occasion of the feast, the governor was accustomed to release to the crowd one prisoner whom they wished. And at that time, they had a notorious prisoner named Barabbas. So when they had assembled, Pilate said to them, "Which one do you want me to release to you, Barabbas or Jesus, called the Christ?" For he knew that it was out of envy that they had handed him over. While he was still seated on the bench, his wife sent him a message. "Have nothing to do with that righteous man. I suffered much in a dream today because of him." The chief priests and the elders persuaded the crowds to ask for Barabbas, but to destroy Jesus. The governor said to them in reply, "Which of the two do you want me to release to you?" They answered, "Barabbas." Pilate said to them, "Then what shall I do with Jesus called the Christ?" They all said, "Let him be crucified." But he said, "Why? What evil has he done?" They only shouted the louder, "Let him be crucified." When Pilate saw that he was not succeeding at all, but that a riot was breaking out instead, he took water and washed his hands in the sight of the crowd, saying, "I am innocent of this man's blood. Look to it yourselves." And the whole people said in reply, "His blood be upon us and upon our children." Then he released Barabbas to them. But after he had Jesus scourged, he handed him over to be crucified. Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus inside the praetorium and gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped off his clothes and threw a scarlet military cloak about him. Weaving a crown out of thorns, they placed it on his head, and a reed in his right hand. And kneeling before him, they mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!" They spat upon him and took the reed and kept striking him on the head. And when they had mocked him, they stripped him of the cloak, dressed him in his own clothes, and led him off to crucify him. As they were going out, they met a Cyrenian named Simon. This man they pressed into service to carry his cross. And when they came to a place called Golgotha, which means place of the skull, they gave Jesus wine to drink mixed with gall. But when he had tasted it, he refused to drink. After they had crucified him, they divided his garments by casting lots. Then they sat down and kept watch over him there. And they placed over his head the written charge against him: "This is Jesus, the King of the Jews." 2 revolutionaries were crucified with him, one on his right and the other on his left. Those passing by reviled him, shaking their heads and saying, "You who would destroy the temple and rebuild it in 3 days, save yourself, if you are the Son of God, and come down from the cross." Likewise, the chief priests with the scribes and elders mocked him and said, "He saved others, but he cannot save himself. So he is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him." He trusted God. Let him deliver him now if he wants him, for he said, I am the Son of God. The revolutionaries who were crucified with him also kept abusing him in the same way. From noon onward, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. And about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out in a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you forsaken me? Some of the bystanders who heard it said, this one is calling for Elijah. Immediately, one of them ran to get a sponge. He soaked it in wine and putting it on a reed, gave it to him to drink. But the rest said, wait, let us see if Elijah comes to save him. But Jesus cried out again in a loud voice and gave up his spirit. And behold, the veil of the sanctuary was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth quaked, rocks were split, tombs were opened, and the bodies of many saints who had fallen asleep were raised. And coming forth from their tombs after his resurrection, they entered the holy city and appeared to many. The centurion and the men with him who were keeping watch over Jesus feared greatly when they saw the earthquake and all that was happening. And they said, truly, this was the Son of God. The Gospel of the Lord. So, today we are humbled by the truths of this passion narrative, this proclamation. The cross represents a seemingly irreconcilable difference. The one we proclaim as Savior of the world was himself humiliated and brutally murdered. Yet we rely on the cross as the cornerstone of our Christian expression. The cross is the place where the sinfulness of humanity meets the love of God, where disaster and despair become victory and joy, where from an apparent end comes a most hopeful beginning. Today, of course, we experience something of a paradox. We gather at the most sacred time of the church calendar, the start of Holy Week, on a day when we ponder the solemn proclamation of the Passion. We possess anxiety and uncertainty, and in some cases, grief over the circumstances of our lives and the world. Maybe it's too simple to point out that the devastation of the crucifixion led to the overwhelming victory and joy of the resurrection. Another way to make sense of this is to embrace the genuine love, friendship, affirmation, and growth that exists in our families and as we celebrate this peaceable Mount Carmel community. Over the last few days, I've had the privilege of calling a number of Mount Carmel families, over 30 families in all. Initially, it seemed like an obligation, but ultimately, it was an affirmation of us, of what we are doing, listening and caring about each other. In the end, it was tremendous blessing and privilege. Many of us know something of the power and revelation of such apparent contradictions. We have experienced death and losses that we never would have chosen for ourselves, yet those relationships affect us still. Those losses and transitions have often triggered in us a wellspring of compassion that we would not have realized on our own. Charity that might have otherwise been stunted. A vision of the world that doesn't merely allow us to belong, but to serve, to walk in the footsteps of Jesus in a manner worthy of our calling. As such, we are enabled to enter into the most precious, intimate experiences of others' lives, which is to say, often companioning others in their suffering. We take these cherished stepping stones and do not simply hold them dear and hold them close, but we use them to energize our Christ-like presence in ways which currently may be unimaginable. The wisdom of God has provided for us the means by which to comprehend a plan we would not have chosen for ourselves, namely God's plan. Jesus' cross was not a tragic accident, but was the fullest measure of devotion of which we still say there is no greater love than this. Our tragedies and losses, our experiences and relationships have marked us to extend and devote our charity on behalf of others as well. May we have the courage to love in such a manner today and for all the days to come. God bless you.